Follow the Sith slaves, they will show you to your quarters, accept you home." The slaves cleared the room quickly as Darth Lucratus stood in front, not taking his eyes off of Captain Idiot as he spoke again. "Sir, I don't know what this is about or what everyone told you about me. Stop staring at me like a starving crate dragon. If you're going to do so, then do it, and stop standing so damn close to me." The Dark Lord got in the man's face and said, "What did you say to me?" The Captain Force pushed the Dark Lord across the room and yelled, "You stink too, you smelly bastard." That was it. Lord Lucratus had enough with the captain and squeezed his index finger and thumb together, raised his hand into the air as Holm levitated 5 feet off of the floor and started choking. Darth Lucratus slowly walked over to the man and brought him down, and using the Force, keeping him standing at attention, the Sith Lord leaned into the captain and said, "Now you die." The captain started shaking and foaming at the mouth as the Dark Lord tightened his grasp of the man's throat. Captain Holm was so frightened that he urinated in his pants. The Dark Lord looked down and saw that he was standing in a puddle and his feet were wet. He force threw Holm across the room and into a marble wall. He slid down to the floor and slowly got up on his feet and spoke softly. "Is that all you got? You move slower than a pregnant bantha, you worthless excuse for a Sith Lord." Darth Bruticus was in the hangar overseeing the freighters being loaded with supplies. He felt a flutter in the Force and yelled to Lord Sin as he ran away. "I must go. Lord Lucratus is in danger." Lord Sin and Darth Tavion both felt it as well and followed the Grand Master. Darth Lucratus walked toward the captain at a quickened pace as the man pulled a small cylinder from his pocket and threw it at the Dark Lord. As the device got within a few feet from Darth Lucratus, it turned on and was a green lightsaber. The Dark Lord had no time to move. He tried to put his hands in front of his face and deflect the saber from hitting his face, but pow! The lightsaber hit the Sith in the face and burned his hands and cut his fingers off. He fell to the floor and didn't move. The captain used the Force and brought the saber to his hand. He stood over the Sith Lord and raised the green blade ready to strike and said, "No. It's you that's going to die." The blade came down and got within a few inches of Darth Lucratus's head and burned his hair, and suddenly the captain flew back into a marble pillar and didn't move. His lightsaber flew up into the air. As it came down, Lord Sin stood underneath with his saber activated. He swung and the Jedi lightsaber exploded in a bright green ball of fire. Darth Tavion used the Force and contained the blast as Lord Sin Force threw the ball at the fallen Jedi. Darth Bruticus knelt down and checked on his friend as he spoke into a comlink. "Get a medical unit here. Now." He looked up and saw that the two Dark Lords were having fun with the fallen Jedi. The fireball hit the Jedi and exploded his body on contact, sending bits and pieces raining down on Darth Tavion, who tried to cover his face but was too late. Lord Sin laughed while Darth Tavion was picking pieces of Jedi out of his hair. Darth Tavion had just about enough with Sin's brutal tactics, and he had begun thinking of ways to rid everyone of the Sith Lord. The medical droids arrived and began to move Darth Lucratus out of the room. The Dark Lords followed as Darth Bruticus looked around at the Jedi remains. A droid spoke to the Grand Master as he was walking to the infirmary. "Something I can do, sir." Darth Bruticus stopped and said, "Clean up that mess." The droid bowed and said, "I will at once, Lord Bruticus." The droid walked over and started cleaning as the Dark Lords escorted Darth Lucratus to the infirmary. Industrial District. Coruscant. A hooded figure entered the cantina and looked around. Another figure was sitting in the corner having a drink and watching the Hello News. The standing figure walked over and sat down as the other figure let down their hood. It was a young man who said, well, Grand Master Kalana, what brings you to a place like this? You'd better be careful. You'll get your fingernails dirty in here, and it's no place for someone like you." Kalana sipped the man's drink and said, "I'm no longer a Jedi. I left the Order." The man laughed long and hard and almost fell out of his chair. "You are still a Jedi. You'll have to prove to me that you are no longer one of their worthless scum, and that will be no easy task to show me," he said, still laughing. Kalana stood up. She had heard enough of his mouth. She walked outside as the man rose from his seat and followed her. Outside she spotted the two ships that were following her. The former Grand Master of the Jedi held out her arms and clapped her hands together. The two spy ships bumped together, exploded and crashed into a building. Kalana turned her head, looked at the man and said, "How's that for proof?" The man laughed. "That's your proof. You are a Grand Master for more than 20 years and that's all you can come up with. I thought that you would bring every building down along with those 2 ships, wreaking havoc and driving fear and terror into the hearts and minds of those people out there. I am very disappointed in you. You have shown me that a true Jedi is nothing more than a slave to her own order and will be anything more than exactly that. Hell, for all I know you could have staged that little stunt." Kalana walked to her ship and boarded. The man walked over to the cockpit as she spoke. "So how do you propose that I prove myself to you?" The man gave her a holocard and said, "Go to this planet and get a different ship, then go to this address on Coruscant, tell no one and stop being so damn obvious. Now go," he said, secretly placing a tracking device on her ship and walked back into the cantina. Kalana set the coordinates and headed for space. The man watched the ship take off and pulled a comlink from his pocket. "Lord Bruticus. I have made contact with the Grand Master and I'm currently tracking her. There were no complications. All is going as planned," the man said, pulling his hood over his head. "Excellent work, Lord Sin. Keep me updated," Bruticus said as he turned the comm off and looked over at his friend in the infirmary. "Good news. Darth Lucratus, you are going to live, but there will be some complications," he said, laughing so hard that he fell out of the chair and onto the floor. He got up and went to get his chair. The Dark Lord sat up in bed, giving Darth Bruticus an evil look and said, "Oh, do shut up, you bantha, flattery will get you nowhere," Lucratus said as his friend started laughing again. The wounded Sith used the Force and pulled the chair away as Lord Bruticus went to sit down. He fell on the floor and Darth Lucratus died laughing as his friend lay sprawled out on the floor. Jarsa Fett came out of hyperspace, flying to his destination. His hologram beeped. He put the controls on auto and answered. Yes, a hooded figure appeared and said, "Well, Fett, I have a small job for you if you're up to it." Jarsa nodded and said, "I'm armed and ready, just say the word." The Dark Lord gave him detailed instructions on what to do and ended the transmission. Fett changed his course, left the planet and went into hyperspace. If Taba wanted a show, then he would give him one, and he would never forget it. The bounty hunter sat back in his seat and carefully planned out his method of attack, and then went to sleep. The autopilot took the ship out of hyperspace and landed it on top of an abandoned building in the industrial district on Coruscant. The sun was setting and it was the day before the event was to take place. Fett woke and exited the ship. Activating his jetpack, he flew to the Senate and met with a senator that gave him further instructions. Leaving, he contacted the man and gave him the instructions to do the job that Fett paid him for. Kalana landed on Ilum, a planet that she knew very well. She had gathered crystals here and made thousands of Jedi lightsabers over the years. Arriving at her destination, she changed her clothes, cut her hair, switched ships and left the planet. Heading to her second destination to carry out her orders, a hologram appeared and greeted her. "I see that you've decided to move on to the next step. You must hate the Jedi or you would not be here, or you have something else up that Jedi sleeve of yours." The man said, "Like I said before, the Jedi will pay for their incompetence and stupidity. What I do now is of my own free will. And your help," she said to him. "Excellent, everything is ready to go as soon as you arrive. I can't wait to see what's in store for the Jedi," the man said as the hologram faded. Kalana contacted an old friend of hers and gave him instructions to carry out. She would arrive soon and the Jedi would pay. Jedi Temple. Naboo. Master Rias was taking a group of younglings to the temple from a trip to the Grand Jedi Temple on Naboo. As the ship entered the hangar and the students got out, Rias felt a ripple in the Force and turned around to see a Republic refueler fly into the hangar and explode, killing everyone in that part of the temple including himself and the younglings. Pieces of the temple fell on the innocent Jedi standing below and crushing them to death as well. Halonu's bots were interviewing the senator from Anshan on the entrance steps of the Jedi Temple, along with 100 Jedi who joined him for the grand occasion. A ship dived as the senator gave his speech. He looked up, pointed and yelled, "Look!" It was too late. The ship crashed into the podium and exploded at the entrance doors of the temple, killing senators, Jedi, civilians, and severely damaging the temple on Coruscant. Lord Sin walked to Darth Bruticus's quarters. He knocked and entered. Upon entry, He saw 10 Sith masters sitting around a table, some were communicating to people with comlinks, some had holograms, it looked like a war room. Darth Bruticus walked over to Lord Sin and Darth Taba, and motioned for the two of them to leave the room to talk. Outside the room, the Sith Grand Master updated the two masters on the current situations, what was to come, and what had transpired at the Jedi Temple on Coruscant. Everything is going perfectly and no one suspects that the Sith are behind it all. Hell, they have never heard of us to begin with. There will be no one to stop us this time, my friends, but I must return, Lord Bruticus said. Kalana flew to Coruscant. As she approached the planet, the Republic fleet was guarding the large city. She tried to cloak the ship, but they already knew of her location and were on their way to intercept. She was busted. A hologram appeared and spoke to her. Kalana, you are under arrest for the bombings of the Jedi Temple. Her ship was heavily escorted to the surface below where she was arrested and heavily sedated to keep her from attacking the soldiers. Her ship was taken en route to be searched, but that didn't happen. Shortly after their departure, it exploded, killing 4 soldiers, 2 Jedi, and severely damaging the ship's hangar. Grand Master Nan was walking from the remembrance room when he grabbed his chest and nearly fell over. Trying to keep from falling over, he leaned against a stone pillar and slid down onto the floor. His heart slowed its racing beats down as he closed his eyes and began to meditate. Through the Force he saw the bombing of the temple on Coruscant, and that it wasn't Grand Master Kalana that was behind the attacks but something else. Something very, very evil. Lord Sin sat in the council chambers with Darth Bruticus discussing what was to happen next. The apprentices are with Master Lazar at the Citadel, and soon will begin the next part of the plan, Lord Sin said, looking out of the windows and watching the acid rain fall. Lovely day, isn't it? Darth Bruticus said, tossing a piece of fruit in his mouth. Lord Sin sat down at the table and turned on a holomap of the galaxy. Studying? Darth Bruticus asked, sitting down next to the Dark Lord. No, I'm just looking, Lord Sin replied, looking over at him. Darth Bruticus closed his eyes and the room went black. The young Sith sat up in his chair wondering what was going on. The Grand Master began floating. He opened his eyes and the room lit up once again. He whispered, I know where she is. The Dark Lord waited a while as Darth Bruticus stared at the wall and finally spoke. She will be sent to Nemodia. Lord Sin gave Bruticus an odd look and said, Nemodia? There's nothing on that disgusting planet. The Grand Master leaned forward in his chair and said, Exactly. Nothing. Nothing to distract the landing of a highly trained Sith Lord, and nothing to keep him from hunting her down. Lord Sin stood and said, Yes, I will go and it will be quick. Darth Bruticus turned off the holomap and followed Lord Sin as he walked out of the room and spoke again to the Sith Master, Send some slaves to do the job instead. The Dark Lord turned around and asked, What? Why? Darth Bruticus said nothing but nodded at him. Ah, I see. Yes, that's a great idea. To take the heat off of the Sith, if there is any, we will congregate them on the planet, and when the Jedi go there. Excellent idea, my friend, the Dark Lord said. Jedi Temple. Coruscant. MZ-12 was hard at work on the Citadel Temple. He had 300 Sith slaves working on 4 others throughout the galaxy. Repairs, the Sith droid said as he and a few apprentices were supervising the workers that were unloading supplies from Korriban. Come on, let's get going. This place will be occupied soon and we need to work as fast as possible, MZ said as he deployed the worker droids. 10 freighters were in the hangar as hundreds of thousands of droids were ordered to their tasks. This will be done in no time and then we're off to the next one. An apprentice said, taking a group of droids to his destination. A great advantage that we have is that the entire Citadel is underground, and there are no vents to release steam into the air. The recyclers keep reusing the waste and air, so no one will know that we are here. The dark side clouds everything. Another apprentice pointed out. MZ-12 patted the students on the back and said, I admire your knowledge of the temple and I have something else to add as well. The students leaned in close waiting for the droid to speak. Get back to work, he yelled as the two of them covered their ears and ran back to work. A holographic intercom started beeping as the Sith droid picked it up and pushed a button. Darth Bruticus appeared. How is it going? He asked. MZ-12 looked at his datapad and replied to his master. 2 days, my lord, then we move on to the next one. The Grand Master nodded and said. Good. "Keep me informed on the progress and tell me what you need at the next site," Darth Bruticus said as the hologram disappeared. MZ returned to his work on the temple, preparing for war. Day became night as Darth Kemenwati sat on the top of the Sith temple looking up at the stars and planets. "Lovely night, isn't it?" The Dark Lord turned and saw Darth Bruticus standing behind him holding 2 glasses. He sat down and handed him a drink. "Jawa juice?" he asked as the master took the drink. "When I was a young boy I could sit all night and watch the night sky until the sun came up," Darth Kemenwati said sipping his drink. Darth Bruticus looked up at the sky and back down to the Sith Master. "I never had the chance to do anything like that. My master never allowed me any free time. Hell, I'll bet I have more lightsaber training than the masters in the temple put together." Darth Bruticus downed his drink and threw the glass over the side of the temple, got up and walked away. Darth Kemenwati followed the Grand Master into the temple and came upon a group of students arguing. Darth Bruticus turned to the Sith Master and said, "I'll leave you to deal with this." The students were fighting over who was better at using the dark side of the Force. Darth Kemenwati didn't say a word. He walked over to the one who was doing all of the talking and Force threw him through the balcony rail. The mouthy boy fell a couple of 100 feet down and landed on his head. Splat was the only sound that was heard. The Dark Lord looked around at all of the students who gasped and backed away from the Sith Master. He looked down and saw that his head smashed open. Darth Cat appeared and stood looking over his fellow master's shoulder. Looking down, he said, "His head looks like that smelly fruit that Lord Bruticus stuffs his face with now and then." Darth Kemenwati chuckled and turned to see the Sith Master standing behind him. "Yes, it does, and all of this work is making me hungry. Let's go eat," he said, and the 2 masters walked away. Lord Sin walked to his quarters. As he entered, he saw a group of slaves hard at work. They had unpacked his things and hung his personal items on the walls. "It's perfect. Now I have a job for each of you," he said as they stopped what they were doing and stood surrounding the Sith Lord. "You each will be assigned a planet, and when you arrive I will give you further instructions on what you should do. You will answer to me and no one else. Do you understand?" he asked. The slaves all nodded and bowed but did not speak. "Get what you need and see me in the hangar. Now," Lord Sin said as they hurried along. The Dark Lord quickly changed his robes, ate and put on his lightsaber harness. Leaving his room he ran into Darth Bruticus. "Did you see Darth Kemenwati's Sith resolve?" he asked. "No, but I can sense what went on," Lord Sin said as the 2 looked at him. He pushed a student through the balcony rail and, splat, right on his head. Darth Nora said, "The mess looked like some of the fruit that you eat," the Grand Master said laughing. "I love this place," he yelled and stretched out his arms. Lord Sin started to laugh and said, "He's probably right. How the hell do you eat that shit? It looks like something that someone threw up and is squishy like bantha poodoo. Did your mother feed that to you as punishment?" Darth Bruticus let out a loud laugh and was laughing harder than his friend. Lord Sin suddenly stopped laughing and gave the Grand Master an evil look and said, "I have 2 questions. Where did you get it and what did you put it in?" Darth Bruticus patted him on the shoulder and replied, "I'll never tell, at least not while I'm alive." Lord Sin stepped away from the Dark Lord when Darth Tavion opened his door, popping his head outside. "So where are we going, Lord Sin?" he asked. "I'm going to kill someone that can't keep their mouth shut, before she tells of our existence. Want to come along?" Darth Tavion stuck his head back inside his room as Darth Bruticus spoke to Lord Sin. Not a lot was known about Lord Tavion. Some say he was a hermit, leaving only when he had to. My master spoke of him on occasion and after his death. I sought him out. The Dark Lord looked out of his room again and saw the Grand Master leaning against the wall. "That looks like a comfy position. Are you holding the wall up?" he asked. Darth Bardicus shook his head and replied, "What is this? Pick on the Grand Master Day." A student came running down the hall and stopped in front of Darth Bruticus. Out of breath, he tried to speak. "Sorry to bother you, Grand Master." The boy didn't get to finish. Lord Sin knew what was wrong and started running. "Let's go," he said, and the 2 masters ran with the boy following close behind. As they came to a dead end, the boy turned to the left and continued running to the lifts as the 2 masters' force leapt over the rail to the floor 50 feet below. Lord Sin activated his lightsabers in mid-air and landed on the floor without losing a step. Darth Bruticus shortly behind the Sith Master activated his saber as well, and both ran for the front entrances. Darth Tavion came out of his room and the two masters were gone. He felt the danger and ran after the two masters. The Sith apprentices were fighting what seemed to be Jedi because of their blue and green colored lightsabers. They had no force powers but were cutting down the apprentices left and right. A woman came around the corner and almost cut Lord Sin across his chest, but he sensed her coming and jumped over her as she ran under him. Darth Bruticus ran into the woman and plunged his saber into her chest and force threw her into the wall, breaking every bone in her body and dropping her to the floor. Lord Sin landed on the floor and saw that there was 100 foes attacking 20 apprentices. Darth Bruticus put his fingers to his lips and whistled. It was loud and got the attention of every enemy in the temple. Some of the foes started running at the Sith Masters when a pack of Sith hellhounds ran into the Great Hall and started attacking them. That should even the odds a little. Lord Sin yelled as he and Darth Bruticus started running toward the group of men that were charging toward them. The Grand Master thrust his saber into a man and rammed his shoulder into the mouth of another as he ran down the men like grass. Lord Sin head-butted the biggest man and force pushed him into his allies as they held their sabers high and cut him to pieces, showering the others with cauterized pieces of their friend. Darth Tavion force jumped over the rail at a group of apprentices that were tired from the fighting and were quickly retreating as he landed in front of them and ran his saber down through the top of a woman's head. The hounds were feasting on the attackers alive. Dead. The battle was so gory that the foes began to get sick and were giving up, but they didn't know that these Sith take prisoners. They were ran through whether they were armed or not, or they became food for the hounds. The attack winded down and Darth Kamenwati found himself against two attackers that were very formidable with a lightsaber. The Dark Lord stood with his saber off, giving the men an evil look. One took a step forward and jumped in the air to do a spinning attack as the other ran toward the Sith Master. Darth Kamenwati stood still and at the last second he moved to his left and force pushed the spinning man into his friend. He got stabbed in the back as the other was sliced in pieces and the hounds finished the rest. The remaining masters assembled in the Great Hall as a man standing by the entrances threw an object at the group, a glass cube. An old way of communication, Darth Tavion said as he broke the cube open and read the note. We know of your existence. Master Jedi Akropa. Darth Bruticus turned to Darth Nora and Darth Tavion and said two words. Kill him. Lord Nora bowed his head and the two Sith Masters' force ran after the Jedi. Darth Sin walked over to Darth Bruticus and said, So Lord Tavion is a man of mystery, he asked. The Grand Master nodded and replied, Yes. Great mystery Lord Tavion is covered in. He is the only Sith to never train an apprentice as far as I know, the Grand Master said. Then how did the knowledge get passed on? Lord Sin asked. I'm not sure. I know when my master learned of him it took many, many years to track him down and understand what he was about. I do know a couple things about Darth Tavion. He is an excellent master of the sword and saber, and he is very knowledgeable about Sith history, Darth Bruticus said. A few hours had passed as the two Sith Lords were on their way to Coruscant. So how did it feel to kill that Jedi scum? Lord Sin asked. Darth Tavion shrugged his shoulders and said, I don't know. I let Darth Nora kill him. The boy just toyed with him until he was so tired he couldn't fight any longer. He dropped his lightsaber and fell to his knees. Put his hands together and bowed. The Dark Lord stood over him and dealt the fatal blow. Lord Sin gave an interesting look to Lord Tavion and asked, Well. Give me the bloody details. You know I live for that kind of stuff. Darth Tavion laughed and sat down next to him and said. He used Force Storm and started roasting him like a piece of meat, and every time he begged, the Dark Lord shocked him more until the Grand Master was exhausted and near death. He stood over him and slammed his lightsaber down through the top of his head, brought the saber out of the front of the Jedi and as the body started peeling itself in half. He thrust his saber into the Jedi's chest and turned the Jedi into a pile of melted burning flesh. It was really messy. Lord Sin sat in his seat and was mortified. Wow. That was awesome. I wish I was there. The older Sith Lord sat there and laughed. Well, into the Krayt Dragon's Den we go, Lord Tavion said as Sin was polishing the hilt of his saber. How many of those do you use? The Dark Lord asked. Lord Sin stood and opened his cloak and said, I use these, he said, showing 8 doubles and a dozen singles. Darth Tavion looked surprised at Lord Sin and asked him, "Do you want to use one?" The elder held up his hand and shook his head. "No, I have 2 and that's enough for me." Jedi Temple. Coruscant. The 2 Sith arrived on the Jedi-infested planet and started looking for their target. Darth Tavion ran to the young Dark Lord and asked, "What the heck are you doing? We can't go there. That's the Jedi Temple. They will kill us and Darth Bruticus's plans will be foiled." Lord Sin laughed and said, "Lord Tavion, you truly need more training than I. Follow me and witness an ancient unnatural power of the dark side." He turned and started jogging up the stairs of the Jedi Temple. Darth Tavion could not believe what he saw. Lord Sin had walked through the front entrance doors of the temple and no one saw him at all. Darth Tavion put his hood up and slowly walked up the stairs. He passed a few apprentices that paid no attention to him and a group of masters walked by him as if he wasn't there. "Look! A Sith Lord! Get him!" someone yelled. Darth Tavion pulled his hood off of his head, grabbed his lightsaber and looked around. As he turned to look behind him, he saw Lord Sin standing there laughing hard. Darth Tavion was not amused at all. "Maybe I should force push you down those stairs," he said as he and the Joker walked together up the remaining stairs and entered the temple. Hundreds of thousands of Jedi were in the great halls. Darth Tavion stopped, closed his eyes and meditated for a moment, then opened his eyes and spoke. "No one is alerted to our presence, they have no idea that we're here." "How did you do that?" he asked. Lord Sin put his arm around the Dark Lord and said, "Maybe I'll show you one day." "Let's move on," he said as they continued on. The 2 Sith walked through the great halls of the Jedi Temple. Lord Sin and Tavion were studying where everything was. "It will be a great pleasure to see this place fall again," Darth Tavion said to his friend. "It will, and when it does it will be worse than before." Lord Sin looked over at the Sith Lord. "Before?" he asked. The 2 Sith stopped walking as the teacher in Darth Tavion appeared and said, "Exactly 1,200,100 years ago there was a Jedi Knight named Anakin Skywalker who fell to the dark side. He entered this very temple with over 1 million clone troops and destroyed the Jedi and the temple. Only a handful of Jedi survived, but it was many, many thousands of years before they rose in numbers to what they are today. Then there was one Jedi Grand Master over all of the Jedi, now there is one Grand Master for every temple, and the one that we are hunting is the Great Grand Master Jedi, Kalana." The 2 walked on. "When we get back to the temple, if you want, I'll tell you more of this Anakin Skywalker." The wind howled as the rain came down, the rainy season was getting worse and the entrance doors to the Jedi Temple opened and slammed shut as a hooded figure walked through the entrance and bowed to the Jedi watchman. "Still raining outside?" a guard asked. The figure nodded and said, "Yes, and it does not look like it's going to quit anytime soon." The figure walked on, going under the stairways, walking around the hangars, and other key places in the temple. He even went into the council chambers as well. Grand Master Siko Barak was sleeping when the figure walked into his room. He looked around and saw a man lying in bed. The man left the room and went to the library and inspected there before leaving the Great Room of Knowledge and then the temple. He got into his ship and left the planet. Contacting his friend, he let him know of his completed tasks. "Master. Janitor number 001138 here. The temple is cleaned and I'm on my way home," he said. "Good. I'll have your money ready when you arrive." The intercom cut off as the man went into hyperspace. Morning came and the temple on Coruscant was lively. Students were filing into lines in the breakfast room, masters were getting ready for the day's training. Hundreds of Jedi were filling the great halls after breakfast, scurrying like mice trying to get to their classes. The last master had entered the chambers and the council was in session. Boom! 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 A series of explosions went off, rocking the chamber, killing all 12 members and demolishing the tower to rubble on the ground below.